Sakura, just like everyone else in a 500-mile radius, felt it when the four-tailed form appeared. Besides the feeling of impending doom, the tall beam of red light shooting towards the skies was impossible to miss. I should really be running in the opposite direction, Sakura thought, even as her feet continued to carry her forward. Naruto wouldn't want me anywhere near here. There's absolutely nothing I can do. She continued to think, and still, one foot continued to step in front of the other. I must be insane, was Sakura's next thought. Twice she lost her footing and nearly fell on her ass as giant explosions shook the whole forest. Naruto, are you there? She attempted to scream, but her voice refused to obey her, both because her mouth had recently been broken and due to some basic primal instinct instructing her to shut it. She didn't want whatever was in front of her to take notice of her. Either Naruto will still listen to me, in which case I have nothing to fear, or she is lost to me, in which case nothing else will matter. In her next attempt, she did manage to force a bit of sound from her mouth, though to her ears it sounded like a pathetic whimper, nothing like the forest-covering yells she had been trying for. The next moments Sakura only remembered in a blur. She spotted the miniature Kyuubi, the monster Naruto had become, charging out at the forests. There wasn't even time to cry out for her friend. The miniature Kyuubi seemed intent to literally charge through her, not pausing its steps. Instinctively, Sakura closed her eyes and covered her vital areas in a futile attempt to protect herself. When next she opened her eyes, she was flying through the air being carried by a very tall man with long spiky white hair. Fear not, my little damsel in distress. The gallant Jiraiya has arrived to save the day, the man yelled. He put her down a ways away. The miniature Kyuubi, Naruto, was out of sight, but the aura she radiated made it impossible to not know where she was. Now run along, girl, and let me handle this, Jiraiya said and motioned towards a direction away from Naruto. Just like everyone else, Jiraiya had felt it when the fourth tail appeared, and he knew that took priority over everything else that was happening in the village. He left some of his larger summons behind to deal with the snake summons and then hurried over, giving everyone else instructions to stay away. Naruto, she needs... The pink-haired girl who Jiraiya only knew as Naruto's remaining best friend began to stammer out, but Jiraiya halted it by putting a hand on her head and staring hard into her eyes. What he was doing to her wasn't killing intent, but it was something close to it. Something to drive home the point that he was several leagues above her, and that she shouldn't question him. The best thing you can do is to run away and not die. He again motioned for the direction he wanted her to run in, away from Naruto and away from Konoha. That should keep her safe, whatever happened. The muscles around Sakura's mouth hurt as her face contracted into a grimace. She couldn't argue, and it seemed Naruto was so far gone she wouldn't even pause to hear a plea from Sakura before running her over. Besides, Jiraiya's reputation preceded him. Next to the Hokage, he was the strongest ninja Konoha had. If anyone could save Naruto, he could. And the child within Sakura desperately wanted to trust this adult authority figure, to trust that he would make all these bad things go away. So she obeyed, but contrary to Jiraiya's wishes, she didn't keep running. Instead, she stayed dangerously close. As foolish as Sakura knew she was being, she just couldn't abandon Naruto. Jiraiya didn't have any further attention to spare on Sakura. He got the feeling that the Kyuubi had only half-heartedly tried to kill Sakura before. She wasn't the target, she just happened to be standing in the way. After it had missed, it just kept running towards the village and Jiraiya had to hurry to catch up. The Kyuubi seemed so intent on its goal it didn't even seem to notice Jiraiya until he was close enough to grab onto one of its hind legs with his hair and reel it in like a fish. Jiraiya had a small paper seal ready. All he'd need to do was to slap this thing on, and the Kyuubi's power would be suppressed. It wasn't that easy, however. The Kyuubi turned in midair to face him and spit out a bolt of pure concussive force in his direction. It didn't do any real damage, but Jiraiya was forced to let go and be sent flying. He managed to control his fall and more or less land on his feet. Alright Jiraiya, Minato managed to beat this thing when it was free and at full power. I'm up against a watered down version of it, and all I need to do is to slap a little seal on, and it's over. Surely I can manage that much. Jiraiya thought to himself. At least I've got its attention now. The QB seemed to have decided he was a real threat and that it was best to focus on him before continuing on towards Konoha.
Naruto, can you hear me?
Jiraiya yelled. Naruto could indeed hear Jiraiya from inside the seal, but her mind was nearly catatonic. When she saw Sakura nearly being run over, her mind had almost shut itself down from the sheer horror of what had almost happened. Beyond that, she felt like she was drowning and she could only hear Jiraiya calling as if from far away. In the real world, the miniature QB charged at Jiraiya, and immediately Jiraiya came to two unpleasant realizations. First, he wasn't fighting a mad beast, but an intelligent creature. The way it darted in and out of his range and preferred to attack him from a distance with its tail proved it. It knew what Jiraiya needed to do to stop it and was responding accordingly. Second, even a watered-down version of the QB far surpassed him in speed and power. Though Jiraiya didn't know this, it could have been far worse. Minato made Naruto's seal so it was a lot easier to pull chakra by the host from the Biju instead of pushed by the Biju into the host. When Naruto was briefly in control of the four-tailed form, and aided by the QB, she had the ability to fire several miniature tail beast bombs in rapid succession. Now, with only the QB pushing chakra and Naruto no longer being a willing partner pulling chakra from the seal, he needed to spend most of his chakra simply maintaining his current control over Naruto, and couldn't push through enough chakra to really use the Biju Dama more than a few times, and he wanted to save those for the Leaf Village itself. That said, Jiraiya, as he was fighting now, was still at a clear disadvantage. The QB was too fast and savvy to be caught in a mud trap, and too strong to be held by his hair-based jutsus. Whenever he got close enough to try and use his prepared seal, a portion of the QB's chakra would separate from its body to slap it away. He would first need to blast a path through that corrosive chakra. More than that, he needed help.
Summoning Jutsu!
A red toad with a shield and a two-pronged fork appeared. Jiraiya, what do you... Oh my. Gamaken trailed off as he saw the blatantly obvious reason why he had been summoned. I don't know if I'm up to this, Jiraiya. I just need your help to pin her into place for a few moments. Strike when you see an opening. I'll try my best, Jiraiya, but please don't hate me if I fail, Gamaken said, and jumped so they could attack the QB from both sides. The QB first tried its luck with Gamaken, but his shield seemed just up to the task of fending him off. And now with backup, Jiraiya felt safer to be a little more aggressive. Aggressive enough so that the QB couldn't just ignore him, and when the QB turned its full attention back on him, Gamaken managed to take the opportunity to pin the QB between the forks of his staff. Now's my chance, Jiraiya thought. First to blast away some of that corrosive chakra. He charged a powerful Rasengan and came at the miniature QB from above. Its wide ghastly eyes focused on him, and disturbingly, its glowing white mouth seemed to smile at him. Almost at the last moment, the red chakra parted at the point Jiraiya was about to impact, revealing soft pink flesh. No! Jiraiya thought, and the Rasengan flickered out of existence. An instant later, the red chakra flowed back over Naruto's skin like water, and the opportunity was lost. In the next moment, Gamaken was sent flying with such force that when he came back down, he was sent back to Mount Miyoboku, with a lament of, "I'm sorry, I was too clumsy." Jiraiya meanwhile paid for his failed attack with a massive gash wound when the QB clawed at him. "Damn you!" Jiraiya growled at the beast. Even an animal should know basic self-preservation. To Jiraiya's immense surprise, the QB seemed inclined to answer. The red chakra parted a little around Naruto's face to reveal her mouth and eyes. Her eyes glowed with such a strong red light that no pupils could be made out, and her mouth glowed with that same ghastly white light from before. "I knew you couldn't kill the girl." The words came in Naruto's voice, but it held a strange echo of the QB's deeper voice. "You think I'd pick the safety of a single girl over the whole Leaf Village? What kind of shinobi do you think I am?" Jiraiya bluffed. The QB smiled using Naruto's face. I would have won either way. By all means, slay the child and set me free. I am immortal. The process of reforming if my form is completely destroyed is unpleasant, but I'll suffer it willingly if it gains me my freedom. Jiraiya realized his situation had just become even more dire. Not only was he now both injured and fighting an opponent far more powerful than himself, now it seemed Naruto's life could be taken hostage as well. A moot point. You would not kill this child. Isn't that right, Mr. Godfather? Of all times for that secret to be forced to the surface.
How do you know that?
I see and hear what my jailers see and hear. I was there when you promised Minato and Kushina you'd take care of their brat, if anything were to happen to them. This finally broke through the stupor Naruto's mind had been in after she had nearly saw Sakura die. What? That's not possible!
You were not told?
The QB mocked. He spoke the words both inside Naruto's mindscape as well as in the real world. Kurama wanted Jiraiya to know what Naruto was learning.
This man is your godfather, brat. He wants to take care of you if anything were to happen to your parents.
Kurama's voice dripped with false sympathy.
I guess he just didn't want you.
That's not... I... Jiraiya's voice wavered as he tried and failed to come up with something to say. There were plenty of good reasons for why he hadn't taken Naruto with him all those years ago. He was constantly out on missions and hunting for Orochimaru. You couldn't take a baby with you when you were doing that. He had been given reassurances by the third Hokage that Naruto was being taken care of. Yet all of those excuses suddenly felt hollow. The terrible truth was that the Nine-Tails wasn't lying. Jiraiya hadn't wanted to be saddled with a baby and a living reminder of Minato and Kushina. And when the pain faded enough so that he could approach her, it felt like it would be too little too late.
Don't worry, Naruto,
the QB said, again both inside of the seal as well as in the real world. I will claim vengeance for you. Now, with his chest bleeding, Jiraiya had even more trouble fending off the QB. Not only that, the QB now took advantage of Jiraiya's reluctance to use any force that could be lethal against him, by not even bothering to dodge any of his attacks besides any that might give Jiraiya an opportunity to seal him.
Naruto, I know you're in there somewhere!
Jiraiya yelled. By now he was mostly just focusing on staying alive and buying time. For what he didn't know. A miracle, perhaps. I'm sorry. Your parents did indeed entrust you to me, and I betrayed that trust. I should have been there for you all these years, and I wasn't. Perhaps if I was, all of this could have been avoided. Jiraiya was forced to jump back as a giant claw of red chakra came down to rip apart the rocks he had been standing on. But I won't fail this time. I will save you or die trying, but I need your help. I can't beat him on my own. You need to fight against his control somehow. I don't know how! Naruto cried from inside the seal, but of course Jiraiya couldn't hear her. From her perspective, she was simply drowning in dense, dirty water. The only reason she was even aware of what was going on outside was that the QB wanted her to be, because he wanted to rub his victory in her face. Figuratively backed into a corner, Jiraiya decided to play his last big card. Summoning Jutsu! A large cloud of smoke accompanied another summoning. What is it, Jiraiya boy? A blasted salt, look out! Fukasaku and Shima clung to Jiraiya's back as he continued to back away from the QB. Do you need help entering Sage mode, Jiraiya boy? I'm not seeing much choice here, Jiraiya said. It wasn't that easy, however. Jiraiya was again reminded that the QB was an ancient, intelligent creature. He recognized what Jiraiya was trying to do and didn't seem inclined to allow it. He also seemed to know that either Jiraiya or the Elder Toads needed to be completely still for a prolonged period of time for this to work, and was taking measures to counter this. At every opportunity, he blasted Jiraiya with small but swift waves of pure concussive force from his mouth. This wasn't really damaging, but it shook both Jiraiya and the toads enough that each time they were hit, the process of collecting nature chakra was disrupted. "Jiraiya boy, we can't keep this up," Fukasaku said. They had given up on trying to enter Sage mode. The Kyuubi was simply too fast and smart to allow it. They'd need another big distraction, and Jiraiya had left most of his big summons behind to deal with the snake summons in the Leaf Village. And Gamaken had already been beaten. And quite frankly, Jiraiya wasn't sure he had the stamina for another big summon after all this. Ma and Pa might be small, but they were powerful, and calling them both was like calling Kamabunta twice over. "We need to attack," Fukasaku insisted. Sage mode might be out of reach, but Fukasaku and Shima were dangerous ninjutsu users even without that. Fukasaku flashed some hand signs and shot a stream of water from his mouth with such pressure it could cut through stone. The Kyuubi, though Jiraiya suspected he could dodge the attack, didn't, and the water cut into the miniature Kyuubi's shoulder, and some splashes of blood were sent flying. "Stop! The Kyuubi won't defend against our attacks and we'll end up just killing Naruto. That's Minato's child over there." "We know that, Jiraiya boy, but..." Whatever else Fukasaku was about to say was lost as 2 arms of red chakra erupted from beneath the ground. Fukasaku was snapped up and he was immediately forced to reverse summon himself to Mount Miyobuku unless he wanted to die right then and there. Shima was sent flying out of sight. Jiraiya, meanwhile, was sent crashing through several boulders. He tried to stand back up, despite the several bones he had broken, but he only managed to cough up blood. "I'm sorry, Minato. I may only be fighting less than half of the Kyuubi's full power, but I was never even half the ninja you were." "No," Naruto whispered in horror upon seeing her best hope defeated.
Let's wrap this up so we continue on towards the Leaf Village, shall we?
The Kyuubi said to Naruto, and the miniature Kyuubi form started its lazy stroll towards Jiraiya. The Kyuubi wanted to draw this out and enjoy Naruto's despair. Hidden not far from the scene, Sakura too saw Jiraiya, one of Konoha's greatest champions, fall. He can't save Naruto, Sakura realized. She couldn't allow Naruto to kill him. Sakura knew Naruto would never forgive herself if she did. The miniature Kyuubi didn't seem to be in a hurry at the moment, so maybe now was the time. The 4-tailed form stopped upon seeing Sakura, and inside the seal, the Kyuubi laughed. "Stupid girl! I told you to run!" Jiraiya managed to force out of his mouth. "Naruto, please, you have to stop! This isn't you!" Sakura had her arms outstretched as she bodily interposed herself between Jiraiya and Naruto. "Of course it's not me, but I can't do anything!" Naruto shouted and turned towards the Ninetales. "Please, I'm begging you, don't hurt her!" Another laugh was the only response, and the Kyuubi again started to advance forward. Throwing away all pride, Naruto got down on her knees and prostrated herself, tears streaming down her face, and begged, "Please, Lord Kyuubi, Master, don't hurt Sakura, I'll do anything."
Anything? Very well. Remove the seal from my cage. Surrender your body and soul to me. Let me devour you, and I will spare your friend.
If she agreed, Kurama even planned to honor that deal. The pink-haired girl meant nothing to him. Oh, she was still human and therefore completely without any sort of moral value. But she wasn't an Uchiha, who dared to control him with their eyes. Nor a Senju, who dared to distribute him and his brethren to all the ninja villages like possessions. Nor an Uzumaki, who had invented most of the sealing jutsus used to seal the Biju. She was simply another worthless human. "And Jiraiya? And the Leaf Village? Do you promise to spare them as well?"
Just your little friend, brat. That's all you get. Now your answer.
And when Naruto took too long for his taste to answer, he started moving forward again. "No, okay, I'll do it. Anything. Just don't hurt Sakura."
You know what to do.
The QB said. The water all around her parted, leaving a clear path towards the seal that was illuminated by the glow of the QB, like a cruel parody of a red carpet, leading her towards her doom. She slowly started to move towards the cage. Glowing red eyes stared at her form with hunger, and the giant fox even licked his lips in anticipation. Ino. Hang on, Ino. I'm coming to join you. Naruto fought, and with trembling hands grabbed the large paper seal over the QB's cage. She started to tear it off, but before the last strip of paper was torn, new hands covered both of her own, stopping her actions. I think that's quite enough, a soft voice said, and he firmly guided her hands to push the seal back in place. Naruto turned her head and she had to blink several times to clear the tears from her eyes before she could make out his features. Papa? Naruto said, her eyes completely transfixed. The QB slammed against his cage and bellowed,
You're dead, Fourth Hokage! Begone!
The action was so loud and violent, and her fear of the QB so great, it startled Naruto out of her stupor. She yelped in terror and proceeded to hide and cower behind Minato's legs. Minato looked down at her trembling form, and then at the QB. You, stop bullying my daughter. Whatever vitriol the QB was about to spew was lost as Minato lightly tapped the seal, and by doing so, somehow sent the QB flying to the back of his cage and out of sight. I'm saved. I'm not going to get eaten, Naruto realized. The easy way in which Minato handled the QB just now settled it. The way Minato turned and smiled reassuringly at her seemed to cause her mind to regress to being a small child, and she started to cling desperately to his waist. Are you really back? Not for long, I'm afraid, Minato said. This just caused Naruto to cling to him even tighter. I'm just an echo, a failsafe left behind in case the seal ever threatened to break. You're him, Naruto insisted. Minato, despite being somewhat pressed for time, gave Naruto a minute, and he'd be lying if he didn't want some time to enjoy the moment as well. I expected you to be angry at me. With great reluctance, Naruto finally let go of him. She recalled all the times she had spoken of her father with bitterness and resentment these past few months. She shuffled awkwardly in place and couldn't meet his eyes. How much do you know? I've always been watching. I'm sorry for everything I ever said. You're apologizing. I may have saved you just now, but you wouldn't have been in danger if I hadn't sealed the QB into you. Naruto shook her head. That doesn't matter now. I'm safe. Sakura's safe. And you're here. Naruto grimaced. I don't even care that Gaara escaped. He can go hang for all I care. After this, I'm done. I'll make it so I'll never have any cause to be tempted by the QB's false promise of power ever again. Naruto, my little girl, Minato said sadly. How I wish that Gaara of the Desert would be the worst monster you'll ever need to contend with. If there are other monsters out there, let someone else deal with them. Someone more capable. I hope that can be the case, but I fear that just quitting may not be an option for you. That wasn't what Naruto wanted to hear. It was even more upsetting because she knew that if her father asked it of her now, she would continue purely based on that. Why? Because I'm the QB's Jinchuriki, a military asset to the village? Because I've been blessed with great talent? Because I know you, Naruto. When people are in danger, it's not in your nature to simply look away. Remember those ninjas from the Hidden Rain you saved in the Forest of Death? You did so without thinking. That is who you are, Naruto. I'm not telling you you can't quit because I want you to fight. I'm telling you you can't quit because I know you will want to fight. And I want you to have the best chance of surviving when you do. Well, what I do is always make things worse, If you've been paying attention, I'm one big screw-up. You made one mistake, which nearly cost me everything. Minato just shrugged. I don't need to convince you you're amazing. You'll end up proving it to yourself and everyone before long. Naruto, despite still not believing him, couldn't help but smile at that show of faith. So what other monsters are out there that you think I should fight? Because if you're talking about Orochimaru, he seems way out of my league. Again, I wish he would be the worst you'll ever need to contend with. Worse than Orochimaru? Someone whom even I could not defeat. Naruto found that hard to believe. But you're unstoppable! You even beat the Kyuubi! And so Minato would narrate the full events of 13 years ago, giving just a little more detail than he did in canon. In fact, considering Minato's spirit seems to have some control over the Reaper Death Seal, and they are in the Reaper Death Seal, Minato just snaps his fingers and visually shows everything that happened from his perspective. In other words, he is giving Naruto all the information that Ken and Naruto got from Kushina, because why wouldn't he give all that information right away? Madara Uchiha, are you sure? Naruto asked once they got to that part. He is the only one in recorded history to have ever been able to use his Sharingan to control the Nine-Tails, and considering how skilled he was, I believe it might be him. But wouldn't Madara be like... Naruto looked at her fingers as if she was using them to count something, but she found that she couldn't remember the specifics from her lessons. Like, really old? For a shinobi who is both powerful and depraved and desperate enough, there are multiple ways to cheat death. Alright, but again, I'm just a kid and you're, well, amazing! If you couldn't, then what in the blazes am I supposed to do? This isn't fair, You just want to spend your days in peace with your friends, Minato finished for her. Believe me, I get that. But you've already discovered that the world you live in won't allow it to be that easy. Would that I could protect you from all this, but I can't. And this is too big for you to run away from. This trouble will find you eventually. If this is truly Madara, and he still lives, chances are he'll want the Nine-Tails back. But if you couldn't stop him, then what am I supposed to do? Naruto asked again. Minato grinned. The answer is very simple, isn't it? You just have to become stronger than me. Impossible. You underestimate yourself, but this is why you can't quit. The day may come when you find the peace you seek, but you'll have to fight for it first. Light was coming from Minato's form, signaling that his time was running out. I'm afraid this is goodbye. No, please! I only just met you. There has to be some way to extend this somehow. I'm sorry, Naruto, but it isn't up to me. As a last piece of advice, you can trust Jiraiya. I'm disappointed he wasn't there for you when you were younger, and you can tell him I said that. But right now he's still the second best person for you to put your faith into. Second? Minato smiled broadly. You know who the first is. Whom do you trust the most out of everyone in this world? Naruto didn't need to think on that. Sakura. Indeed. Friendships that strong are stronger than any jutsu. Please give her my thanks for helping to take care of you for all these years. And with those words, Minato's form started to disappear in sparks of yellow light. Dad! Naruto rushed forward, closed her eyes and buried herself in his chest. She remained like that for as long as she could. The stinging injury in her shoulder from when Fukasaku had cut her with a water jutsu signaled her return to the real world. She opened her eyes and found that she was somehow still holding someone. Sakura had her face buried in her shoulder. Their cheeks were touching, and Naruto could feel the wetness of their tears through Sakura's bandages as well as the hiccups that ran through her friend's body. She's okay, Naruto thought. Her father was gone. Gaara had escaped. She had nearly destroyed everything she cared about. One of the most powerful men in all of recorded history might be coming after her. But so long as Sakura was still fine, Naruko felt as if she could still move forward. Sakura seemed to notice that Naruko was back in conscience as she let go of her and sat next to her. "You're okay." From the way the words were slurred, it was clear Sakura was still injured. "Yes, I'm okay. We both are." And Naruko couldn't help but shed a few tears at this fact herself, and the two friends spent some more time hugging each other. When Naruko felt like she could control her voice, she grinned and said, "The fourth Hokage would like to convey his thanks to you." Sakura didn't respond verbally, but the question was clear in her eyes. "I'll explain later, I promise." Only then did Naruko notice that Jiraiya was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Jiraiya?" Something slapped Naruko across the back of her head. "Good of you to finally notice!" Naruko turned around and noticed one of the old toads from before holding a wooden stick. "Jiraiya risks everything to clean up your mess, and you nearly forget about him." "I'll never forget what he did," Naruko said. "But where is he? Last I saw, he looked too hurt to move." "I sent him back home." "You brought him to Konoha?" Naruko asked, and this earned her another light slap from the wooden stick. "My goodness, I heard you were supposed to be clever. Konoha was being attacked and we don't know how that turned out. Until I know for sure it's safe, I won't bring Jiraiya to what might still be a battlefield." Naruko thought that made sense. "Could you take us to him?" "No. Mount Nyabuku is forbidden to anyone but the toads and those who sign our contract." "Ah, I see." Naruko thought of an obvious solution. "Then just have me and Sakura sign your contract." Sakura didn't know whether to groan or laugh at Naruko's audacity. Ma Toad sputtered a little in indignation and then huffed. "A contract like that is no simple thing. You'll need to prove yourself first, or have someone we trust vouch for you. I suspect Jiraiya may do so before long, but until he does, you're still an outsider. An outsider whose reckless stupidity nearly killed my husband." "Yes, I'm really sorry about that. I don't suppose my sorries will mean anything to you, but well, here it is." "Well, I suppose you're still young. A little bit of idiocy can be forgiven, but don't let it happen again." "Never." Ma Toad nodded approvingly at her vehement tone. "Well, I will stick around until I know it's safe for Jiraiya to return, and I suppose I can look after you two tadpoles in the meantime." "Thank you," Naruko said, and Sakura hummed her agreement. And together they made their way back to Konoha. By the time they arrived, the invasion had already been beaten back. A couple of severe-looking ninjas, Ibiki amongst them, greeted them and demanded to know what had happened. Ma Toad at first attempted to tell a lie that would put all the blame for Jiraiya's injuries on Gaara and left out Naruko's loss of control, but Naruko wasn't having it. She felt too guilty to lie about what had happened. At least she wasn't being arrested immediately. That was something. "I'm still alive. Sakura's still alive. Jiraiya's still alive." Naruko kept repeating that to herself like a mantra. She needed that reassurance, especially once she learned of the third Hokage's death. A few days later, somewhere in the land of rivers, which lay between the lands of fire and the lands of wind, Kankuro and Temari finally decided it was safe to stop and rest. They had feared that teams of trackers would be sent after them, since as children of the Kazekage, they'd make valuable hostages. But no such pursuit had come. If it had, it was doubtful the Sand siblings could have outrun them, with Gaara too injured to even walk and needing to be carried. Maybe Konoha had fallen to the combined forces of the Sand and Sound, or perhaps they were too busy with other matters. Cut off from the rest of the world, hiding in a small forest that wasn't even important enough to be given a name, none of the Sand siblings had any way to tell. It was nighttime, and Kankuro was using the stars to make sure they were still heading in the right direction. 4 days at our current speed, and we should make it to the Sand Village, he guessed. And then we'll know how badly our failure impacted the rest of the plan, Temari said. That was hardly our fault. Kankuro said. No, it was mine, Gaara said softly. If I had kept my fight with Uzumaki in Konoha, then even in defeat, the plan would have succeeded. There was no need to chase her out of the village. Had I stayed, she would have had no choice but to confront me where I was. Well, then why did you? Kankuro asked. Her words hurt, Gaara said, a hand clutching his shirt just over his heart. Temari, Kankuro, do you think I didn't try hard enough? I don't think that just trying harder would have made a difference against that abomination, Kankuro said, remembering Naruto's four-tailed form. That's not what I meant. Do you think I did not try hard enough, trying to find those who would accept me, those who wouldn't fear me? You mean you were trying? Kankuro asked incredulously. Kankuro, please shut up, Temari said. She spoke slowly to Gaara, as if to a frightened animal who might bolt at any moment. When did you stop trying? She asked. You wouldn't know. Father kept us mostly separated in those times. Gaara was silent for a while, and Temari and Kankuro allowed the silence to stretch on. They could both tell Gaara was having difficulty talking about this. Did anyone ever tell you what happened to our uncle, Yachimaru? All we were ever told was that you killed him. I did, after he tried to kill me first. Of course he'd leave out that little detail, Temari thought bitterly. Before he died, he told me of our mother's final thoughts. How she hated the village for forcing her to give birth to a demon. How she died hating me and infused her will into the sand, so that my existence would be eternal, an eternal curse inflicted upon the village. He told me my name meant he who only loves himself. Another wish of our mother's. Wow, no wonder you have issues, Kankuro said. Do shut up, Temari said with a sideways glance at Kankuro. Gaara, if Yachimaru wished you ill, maybe he isn't the best source of information on these things. The idea that he might have been lied to seemed to shake Gaara a little. He shook his head as if to clear it. No, he was dying and had no reason to lie. Other than hurting you, from where I'm standing, I can't see how a shield that protects you from all harm could be a sign of hatred. Not all harm, Gaara said with a grimace as he clutched at his heart again. She wanted me to endure, so that I could suffer and make the whole village suffer with me. I don't believe that, Temari said. Why not? Gaara demanded, sounding both angry and desperate. Small specks of sand started to rise in the air, responding to his emotions. What makes you so sure? Temari couldn't think of an answer to that question. It was more of a gut feeling and not based on any evidence. Beyond that, she had to fight to keep her nerves under control. That look in Gaara's eyes tended to be the prelude to someone ending up dead, and he was looking right at her. She had to pick her next words carefully. I don't know, but Gaara. Thank you. Gaara looked confused. Their mother's feelings might remain unknown, but there was someone whose feelings she could prove. Thank you, Gaara, for being born. If she couldn't prove that her mother cared about him, they could at least prove that she did. The sand floating in the air abruptly stopped floating and fell back on the ground. My powers are a curse, he repeated, seemingly to be talking more to himself. Temari was surprised by how young he looked at that moment. Only if you let it be, she said. I tried so often. Nothing I did ever made a difference. It's not my fault. Fault? Uzumaki's words. She told me I chose to become a monster, but it isn't true. I tried. Nothing worked. The medicine didn't work. Tamari had no idea what medicine had to do with any of this, but she understood the rest of it. Maybe it wasn't your fault that you failed, but your only true failure was giving up. Not everyone will think you are a monster, Tamari said, unknowingly echoing Naruto. I don't. Tamari herself was surprised by how sure she sounded. She admitted that she more than once thought of Gaara as a monster in the past, but after everything she had just heard, she couldn't think that way anymore. You're lying, Gaara said, looking frantic. Seriously, dude? Kankuro said with a scowl. We jump in to defend you from that psychotic Uzumaki girl, and you dare say we don't give a damn? Sure, Gaara, you may scare me shitless sometimes, but I don't hate you. Gaara grabbed at his head, and he had his eyes covered. For a moment, Tamari thought he was having a nervous breakdown, as he started to shake lightly. No, that's not a breakdown, he's almost crying. Tamari looked at Kankuro, who seemed completely lost at this. Alright, Tamari, you're the oldest here, so it's up to you, she thought. Standing up, she slowly approached Gaara, keeping a very close eye on the ground for any signs of moving sand. An emotional Gaara had, up until this point, always been a dangerous Gaara. No such dangers appeared, however, and Tamari was able to place a hesitant hand on his shoulder. This only seemed to make things worse, and Gaara seemed to lose the struggle against his own emotions and just about fell apart in her arms. This is what we were all afraid of, Tamari thought, as she stared at the crying child in her arms. He looked so young. They stayed like that for a long time, until Gaara, amazingly, fell asleep. Again, this was usually a bad sign, but there was no sign of possession upon falling asleep. Maybe it was the beating Shukaku had recently received? If so, then at least one good thing had come of this. No, not just one good thing, Tamari thought. As she looked at Kankuro, a sort of understanding passed between them. Gaara wasn't as much of a lost cause as they'd been led to believe, and it would be up to them to support him now. And with this, incredibly, despite their invasion of the Leaf likely having been turned into a disaster probably due to their failed mission, despite the incredibly bad position the Sand Village was now in, with their failed and unprovoked attack, Tamari couldn't help but feel hopeful for the future. And with that, we end this chapter, as well as this major arc of the Chunin exams. Naix out.